Tara, welcome back to Really Famous. Today I'm interviewing ERIN Moriarty. She gives us all kinds of behind the scenes information and scoop on 48 Hours and her podcast, My Life of Crime, and her job as a crime journalist. And she also opens up about her personal hardships and her professional hardships. We really get to know each other, and so you're gonna get to know her too. Let's do it.
Too bad I don't have a pillow. I should have like a...
Oh, a little pillow?
Yeah, I should have like a little throw pillow
that
on.
would
Now
be
you've
fun.
been giving me incentive to get a throw pillow.
Good, yes. Okay, so, I mean, this is really just a conversation. So, I have some things that I think we'll touch on, but I feel like let's just talk and kind of get to know each other a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, and in fact, I will start with what I heard your podcast the other day with your son.
Oh, okay, yes.
My Life of Crime.
Yes.
And so he was on the show with you, giving his perspective. And I felt like it was so good. It was so real, like your reaction to some of the things that he said.
Well, I don't think we ever think about, you know, there are a lot of people who cover crime all the time as reporters or go to war or anything. We don't think about the impact on the family and the children in particular. And, you know, Nick really grew up with it. I started at CBS when he was 2, and I would take him to the office all the time. I wasn't doing so much crime then, but when he was about 5 or 6, we started covering a lot of cases, and particularly what was so weird, when he was 12, we did a kidnapping, and that's when I learned that the most common victim are 12-year-old boys.
So freaking, I remember you saying that.
Yes.
I was like, oh no.
So of course Nick's life changed for a while. Then I'd go home and say, okay, we need to have password, and we need to, you know, his whole life would change depending on what I was covering. So even though I wouldn't really discuss the cases, he knew what I was doing. So I thought that's why we did the podcast of what kind of impact does having a parent work in crime. Probably very similar children who grow up with parents who are cops,
right,
lawyers, who are dealing with tough topics.
Yeah.
And Nick did have an interesting perspective, but not angry with me. But he still does. As you know, I did give my address to BTK, the bind them, torture them, kill them serial killer, and Nick still does have, he jokes about it, but he still thinks that was one of the dumber things I've ever done.
Yeah, I mean, that I agree with that. I feel like that's like, but I know what you said.
The guy's in prison, you know?
But I understand why, because he wanted to send you his art, and you were like, well, I want to get this art. So how could you say no to that, right?
Well, that was my rationale. That was my rationale. But the other day, we're working on another serial killer case, and I don't like doing serial killers because I think that gives them attention, but there's really a benefit for doing this. It's a cautionary tale. This was a man who got his victims by slashing their tires. They didn't know it. And then he would show up as the Good Samaritan. And so I really think there is a benefit. You just do not trust strangers. I mean, that's a sad thing to say. So I don't really like covering serial killers, but you know, sometimes you have to.
Right. So I'm interested in what you said about strangers. So you don't really trust strangers, generally speaking, because of your experience, right?
Sadly, I mean, that is, I think, part of living in the 21st century. I'll contradict myself a bit. You know, I'm a Midwesterner, and when I moved to New York, I had the image of New York that everybody else did, that people were going to be nasty, it's dangerous. Now, when I first moved here, it was a little dangerous. The mid-'80s, it was, New York was having a real financial crisis, and so it was
different.
It really was. But people are the nicest here. So that has changed my attitude. New Yorkers will come to your defense if you're in trouble and never hesitate. They might yell at you if you take their cab and know, use profanity, and then if you're in trouble, they'll save your life. But yes, strangers, and maybe my view is skewed because I do work with crime.
And so there's no question my view could be skewed. In my world, people are murdered in my life because I see it. I'm working on these cases every single week. And if I'm not working on a murder case, I'm talking to people in prison. This is my world. I'm more like a cop than...
Right. Right. So maybe like a little, not jaded isn't the word, but you see all that. Whereas it's very easy for me to go through my life and be like, and tell my kids, please, nobody gets murdered. Like, it happens occasionally. Only the ones that you hear about because it's newsworthy. Like, I can say that because how many people do I know who got murdered?
And
I actually think one, in the history of my people in my world.
But that's more realistic. The way you are, that's more realistic. For my world, I have to say, it does seem like it's more of a possibility, which is, so I would have to agree that I'm a little skewed, yes.
So you never run out of material. There are that many.
No, we don't. And what's interesting, you can't do any murder for television or for a podcast. For me, it has to have an important legal issue, something or new technology. That so excites me. We did a story in Green Bay, Wisconsin, not a big town, the Brown County Sheriff's Department. And there was a young woman who disappeared and then was found dead in a field. That's very unusual in Brown County and Green Bay. And so, of course, the first suspect was her boyfriend. And then, lo and behold, check her phone, and there's texts, nasty texts. And he had told his mother he wanted to break up with her. And just to make this even weirder, there's blood. Her blood is found outside his house. So the cops arrest the boyfriend. But these cops were amazing. I love them. It's one of the reasons why I did the story, and I kept telling them in the interview, I just love you guys, because the defendant was wearing a Fitbit, and it showed that he couldn't have gone to the field where her body was. Also, his car had a progressive GPS, and he didn't drive the car to that field. And so even though this guy was the perfect suspect, something told them. And they admitted to me 20 years ago, he would have been arrested and probably convicted. But they held off, and sure enough, by, I think, good detective work, it turned out it was a drifter who had picked her up, was taking her home. She tried to get out of the car. He killed her right outside her house. That's why the blood was out there. And then, and then took her to that field. But if the cops had just stopped at the obvious, her boyfriend would have been charged and probably convicted. So, I mean, what is not to love about that story?
Right.
And that is the kind, it's not the murder of this young woman that mattered to me. It did, of course.
Yeah.
You know, nobody should be murdered. That's a cautionary tale. She went off by herself late at night in Green Bay. But the reason why I chose that story was because the new technology was just so interesting.
Yeah.
And Brown County told me afterwards that other departments, when they saw that hour, started calling them up. What is this Google dashboard? How did you connect the dots?
That's so cool. And then that helps
yes.
You're really doing your part.
Well, I honestly, that's when people say to me, oh, you know, you're putting on crime as entertainment. I know people take crime as entertainment, no question. That is not the reason why I'm doing it. I honestly think we are doing a public service in so many ways. We're educating jurors. When I first started doing wrongful convictions, and I did a young man by the name of Marty Tancliffe, who never really confessed, but he said, could I have done it? And he was convicted. And the viewers at that time said to me, no, he did it. You couldn't get me to say that. You know, now flash forward to now, and because we've seen how many people, because of DNA, how many people confess to things they didn't do. Now, when I put a young woman on who was, there was no evidence to show she had killed a baby that had been in her care, and you see what happens to her when she's being interrogated by the police, And all the viewers are saying, oh, she didn't do it. That's coerced. So the idea that you could go from really 2005 to 2022 and having people change their attitudes, that makes them better jurors. It gives them a legal education. There's a benefit to that.
It's true. I mean, people do say, like, I have a law degree or based on the shows that I watch.
Only in criminal law, sadly.
Right.
I wish we did more. I have to say, I kind of freelance, and I'm doing a piece now because I changed this guy's life inadvertently with a piece I did in the morning. There was a young man, 16 when he committed a crime. And he was on a crime spree. It was a carjacking, robbery. Nobody was shot, but he had a gun. He had a .38. So when he went to trial, the judge was really, really angry with him. And he had 18 counts. And so she found him guilty on all 18 counts, but set them up consecutively, not concurrently. 241-year prison sentence.
So there's no
never
escaping
getting out.
that.
Never getting out. So I interviewed him, and he told me how he had changed his life so much, and he had. And he kept talking about, even though I have no hope of ever getting out, I don't want to hang out with these. So he's reading books. He wrote 15 books. And then I got the judge who regretted it, and I did a story. There was a state rep in Missouri who saw it. A law passed. He's getting out November 9th on parole.
Wow.
On parole. So, it's not murder, but it's still crime, justice, and legal issues.
Yeah. I mean, it's right. Because I think the thing is, like, people are fascinated, obviously, with true crime. Fascinated. It's the #1 genre of podcasts, right? I mean, in TV shows, I feel like I used to write for the Times. I used to do the Sunday routine a lot. So,
which I love.
Oh, right?
Yes, I love the Sunday routine.
It's the greatest little thing.
And, picking people that I really don't know that much about, and then I'll know. I love that. I always, I start with style section, then I do that. Before I get to the news on Sunday morning, yes.
Right. And you must have to read the news all the time,
of course.
like constantly.
Yeah.
So I used to interview many, many people. What do you do on Sunday night? And it was always like, 48 Hours is not on Sunday nights, but it was always like, oh, these are the shows that I'm obsessed with, because I was always asked, like, what are you watching? What are some of the things? 48 Hours. It's always the true crime shows. Everybody loved them. And also the Real Housewives.
Yeah, which I'm sorry.
I don't want that either.
I can't get through an entire show. I cannot. I could turn it on, and then because I guess as a woman, I don't want women shown that way. That may be really, truly a way women are. But
do you think that has influenced the way that women sort of feel like they should be?
No, but I think it does influence younger women who are doing things online, who are influencers, and that worries me.
Right.
Rather than, you don't see, nobody would watch a reality show with, a bunch of female lawyers, arguing their cases. I wish they would.
Yeah.
If you had been in the room when I went to that event at a law firm last week, and if you've been in the room, wow, these gorgeous, interesting women, but they weren't pulling their hair out, and they weren't drinking too much, and they weren't so.
Yeah, I think that could be interesting TV, because I do think that some of the smartest, most interesting women doing really important things, like that's the show I would want to watch over the Real Housewives. I'm just saying.
Well, because I think true friendship, I think women, what the real story is, if you didn't watch the Real Housewives, and just for a little bit of trivia, Andy Cohen was my intern when he started off.
Oh, that is fun.
So I know Andy very well. I appear in all his books.
Okay.
Yeah, so
all due respect to the Real Housewives then.
Yes.
And by the way, the guest on my show last week is it was just announced she's one of the new Real Housewives of New York. So.
And what's her name?
Jenna Lyons. She was the head of J. Crew.
J. Crew. Yeah, I actually read that, so that will be interesting. Is she really gonna? Oh,
I don't know. It's interesting. I think she's the most. Everybody's like, wait, what? Jenna Lyons on the Real Housewives? So
maybe it will be more fun, because what I was about to say too is that the real story with women is we really rely on our female friendships. We don't have these battles. We need each other, especially as you get older. And the new Supreme Court Justice, I did a story on her for Sunday Morning. But my story was the fact that from all her life, she had these same, her closest friends started at Harvard when she was in college, and they've all become lawyers, and they all got themselves through law school, and give a lot of credit to her. And they're still the closest friends, and I've never spoken to her directly about the friendship, but they tell me that she thinks that had a big part of her success, that she had these women at her back. So the Real Housewives, to me, is just not reality. It's entertainment. And why would these women want to subject themselves to this kind of, sometimes it's humiliation.
Yeah.
So,
because I think maybe they're interested in other things or something. They must have a reason to do it.
Money, I think money, getting their name out, maybe selling, the former housewife who made
Bethany
Skinny
Frankel.
Girl. Bethany Frankel, who did Skinny Girl and made money. So I think it's not that far off from doing a sex tape.
Yeah.
No, that's how I see it. Kim Kardashian is a multi-millionaire. Her sister's a billionaire, in part because of a sex tape. So maybe that makes sense. You're not doing a sex tape, you're doing the Real Housewives. It's just, to me, I wish there were shows that were more realistic about female friendship.
So I feel like there have been some more shows popping up about female friendship, and especially with women as they're going through different ages in their life. So it's not just 20-somethings friendships or whatever. So I feel like more are starting to pop up. Not as much as I'd like to see, but even a show like Better Things. Do you watch that? Do you watch any TV? You don't watch any TV.
Well, I stream a lot. No
you
question.
Do, but
gosh.
But what is it? What kind of things?
I'll tell you. Well, of course, 10%. Call my agent.
10%.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
By the way, that is one of my favorites.
And there are some I love, and I honestly do. They all come with subtitles, but the French legal shows are amazing. And there's the Family Business. There's a couple of shows called Family Business, but there's one of all female lawyers. French.
I don't know that one.
It's great.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
It's really fun. And so that, I have to say, more than linear television. Isn't that terrible?
I don't even have linear television anymore.
Don't?
I cut the cord maybe like a year, 2 years ago.
I'm impressed.
I thought I wouldn't be able to do it because I lived off my DVR, but it's really fine. And you can get shows anyway on, they're streaming everything. Like you can watch your CBS shows, for example, on Paramount Plus, and then you can also watch, I could watch 48 Hours on YouTube.
Well, yeah, but you just really have to, change your whole mindset.
Yeah, except you can also get YouTube on your smart TV, so you can watch it on your actual TV.
That's true.
Yeah. So, for me, I need to watch it on a big screen. I don't really like to watch it on my computer or on my phone.
Depends on where I am. If I'm on an airplane, I'm happy.
Well, so what do you use, an iPad?
I use an iPad. I travel with my iPad. It's just so light. CBS gives me a laptop, but it's so heavy. So I just carry a...
Yeah, no, I think an iPad is perfect. I don't have one, but everybody's like, why are you not bringing an iPad on the plane?
See, it's a perfect size.
Because it's too small to watch. I like to edit also some of my shows on the plane with the laptop. So I'll open it up, put it on the tray.
Yes.
I'll do that. But if I'm going to watch something, I can't watch it on the little screen or on my phone.
No, do you see how many people
looking
at movies on their phone?
How?
And it's like, that doesn't make sense to me.
I can't. That doesn't work for me either. So, all right. So you're traveling all the time. You're on the road like what? How many days?
Well, it's not as bad as it used to be. I was on the road every week. Now it comes and goes. The summer I didn't travel that much. I was on the road earlier this week. I won't be on the road next week because I have a show on Friday, so usually preparing for all that. The following week I'm going to be on the road a lot. Then I won't be again. Probably not till December. I mean, unless a story pops up. But no, so I'm not traveling as much.
Okay, I feel like you must have the most interesting life, like because I know you travel a lot, and that gets old. But I feel like these stories come up. So what happens? A story comes up. A producer tells you about it. Do you see something like? How does this even? Give me the process.
It's all of it. So. Somebody may have a really great 48 hours, and I'll jump on it because I like it. Or there's one I'm working on for this that actually came because I do so many wrongful convictions. It came from the Midwest Innocence Project.
So they contact you directly?
Yes, and so I couldn't believe it, but they did want to do it. It's a Michael Polite case. Then I do cases for Sunday morning. I don't do legal cases. I'm doing a very long story on how a lot of people feel the Child Protective Services needs to change, and it's unfortunately families of color are disproportionately affected by it. No question, the numbers absolutely show that. So I'm doing that, and that came actually from a producer who said, "Do you want to work on this with me?" And I did.
Okay.
So that's actually most of the travel I did this summer. I really worked on that. And then I'm doing 2 pieces for the morning, both that are stories that really matter to me that I brought to them. And they both liked it. They like both cases, so I'll put those on.
So you have a lot of, you're an idea person.
Well, because there's cases or stories that really matter to me. So.
But your mind is always working, it seems like.
Yeah, but I think everybody.
Well, that makes sense too, because how is it not? Because this is what brains do, right? They think.
But like you're working, I think it's also because we're in television. You're always thinking, all right, who am I going to get next? What do I need to talk to that person about? What do I need for that? You're even thinking about it in bed. You wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh my God, I forgot to do this. So I think it's not just me, it's anybody who has a regular, really kind of crazy business like television or practicing law or any of those.
I think that's interesting. I like that. I wouldn't want it any other way personally, because it feeds my natural inclination.
Well, I feel nervous when, I don't know if other people feel this way, but when I haven't been on the road for a while, I think I got to get back on the road. I got to. I'm not doing my work if I'm not on the road.
I feel you.
Yes.
I totally get that. If I'm not talking to people, it is not good. If I'm just like on my own for too long, I do not feel like myself. So that gets me back into myself.
But the other thing, I bet this has really become part of my life. I so rely on my phone to keep track of everything because our lives are so busy. If I don't set alarms, like when there's because I have a screening at noon, so I have to keep an eye on that. I'll miss something.
Yeah.
And that scares me. But having the phone, always checking my calendar on the phone, having a alarm set brings down the stress. I mean, when I'm in the airport and sitting in usually the Admiral's Club, because I only fly American.
Yes.
I set the alarm because I'm worried I'll just zone out and miss my flight, and how embarrassing.
These alarms are amazing. Yeah. I even have my son set an alarm to take out the garbage the same day.
I think that's very smart.
Because you're going to forget. We're going to forget these things.
And how old's your son?
He's 14.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, and that's good. That is good. And he knows that's excellent.
Right.
I also have Alexa to remind me of stuff.
Oh, okay. So she just pops in and tells you throughout the day or whatever.
Well, at the end of the month, too, got to pay your maintenance. Got it,
But if you're not thinking, or if you're not ready to address that when she says it to you, then what happens? You tell her to remind you later?
Well, you can say, please remind me tomorrow.
Okay.
But no, I set it so that it does say, get your butt up and take care of this now.
Yeah.
So it doesn't hang over your head.
I got it, right. Okay, so back to what your process is. So you have all these stories going on, and so you get the idea, or somebody gets the idea, they pitch it to you, or you pitch it yourself, and then you have a team of people who gather all of the
Depending
research.
Again on the show. On the morning, it's just me and a producer, and then an editor when we've brought the stuff back. Yeah, small team. 48 hours, much bigger team. Sunday morning, just the producer and me and an editor. That's it.
Very intimate.
So yes, 48 hours is easier. So that's a positive part. You have more people that can help you get research because you really need to have it. We have these very complex legal cases Sometimes they've gone on for years. You need to be able to read all the police reports. Somebody's got to get all that for you and help you find it. Although we need all that for Sunday morning in the morning too, but it's just on your shoulders. The drawback with 48 is that too many cooks. There's so many people that as it comes to the end, everybody gets, you think you have a great phrase and somebody will go, no, I don't think that's clear enough. And it changes to something you don't like. But so I have more control on the other shows than I do here.
So who writes like the whole story out? Do you do that, or there's a writer?
Well, I write all my pieces for Sunday morning and for the morning. Here it's a joint project. The producer starts, then I take a crack at it, then the senior. Yeah, so
it's that thing with the notes, right? From studio notes, the network notes.
But not Sunday morning is great because the executive producer of Sunday Morning likes the idea of having everyone who reports a story having their voice, and you know what I mean? And it's more than the sound of your voice. And so he will only change if you're inaccurate or if he has a better line. And he usually, if he offers one, he does have a better line. And but otherwise that's yours. But that's structuring too. That's putting the story together. That's everything. So it's challenging and interesting. And
so you're structuring the story there
yourself.
Definitely. You're figuring. Definitely. And do you like that part of it?
Yes. That to me is an important part of writing. Yes.
Okay. And so at what point? And then you do the interviews, and that's when you start traveling at that point, or what?
Yes. Hopefully you have a pretty good idea what your story is. Some people will write before you go out. That's crazy.
No, that is the thing, right? You should be, I'm not telling you how to do your job, but I feel like for the whole interviewing process, and because I'm an interviewer and this is what I do not want to come in and decide what the show is going to be. I need to discover it as I'm talking to the person, which would be even more so for you.
And they may have an idea you never thought of. You think you know what that person's going through. Perfect example. So the guy is getting out on parole after thinking he'd never get out. He actually heard he was getting out a year ago. So that they could help him prepare for the real world. So when I was going there, I assumed that this has been a really joyful year and he's preparing and he's getting his driver's license. But he said to me, no, I haven't been able to sleep all year. And here's why. He said, people are jealous I'm getting out. And they could put something in my cell and then I won't get out. So every night I'm worried it's going to be taken away from me. I never thought of that.
Never.
And that moved me. And that's going to be, of course, part of my story. And I actually told, because the senior did not want me going out before. He was like, why are you interviewing him before? Get him when he comes out and interview him when he comes out. And I was like, yeah, but, it might really be interesting to still see him in his prison garb. And then I said, oh, he was so good.
Yeah.
And he raised things and he was so thoughtful. And when I said to him, a lot of people are going to be worried. You were using drugs when you went in. You went on a crime spree. Why should we want to see you get out? And he was saying, I'm grown up, number one. I was 16 when I came in here. And he said, I get such joy out of reading books, and there's a whole world out there I want to explore, and I believed him, and I just think it was good to hear him say that.
Oh yeah, because the psychological experience that he's having is totally different from what it was before he found out that he was getting out.
Absolutely, and nothing that any of us who've never spent time in prison. I mean, I go in and out, but I never spend a night. To understand.
Yeah, you would never guess what their experience is. No. And you don't really see that much on TV on these shows that we're watching.
No, you don't.
That's one thing you don't. So this is new.
That's
a new twist.
I want to make people think of crime in a much more nuanced way. Way too many men of color are in prison. Way. And you can't just tell me it's all yeah, so to me, how people end up in prison, why they get there. I have a guy, the story I'm doing in December, he's innocent. I could just in one brief way describe, this is why I'm doing the story. In 1994, a man was murdered. Lamar Johnson they focused on him and they convicted him. Before he was even sentenced, the real shooters were found. They confessed to it. They wrote affidavits for him. They are not in prison. Lamar Johnson is in prison today. Yes.
That makes no sense.
I know.
But there's a story there.
There's a story.
we'll
and a lot of it
it
has to do with Missouri law. And so I love those stories. Besides the fact he's also a very compelling human being.
Right.
But I think people need to know the system makes mistakes. And it doesn't hurt that he's a black man and they can say, so here, your idea, the prison filled with black men, well, a lot of those men are innocent. And
yeah, again, this is a
important.
service, again, you're doing by opening everybody's eyes.
It's nuance. It's not black and white.
And people are more open, I think, to understanding and seeing when they see it in a story.
And they care about the people.
Yeah, exactly.
They care. That's one of the wonderful things about social media and the computer is that people suddenly, with Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, people got connected to these cases. Look at Stephen Avery, Making of a Murder.
Right. That's what I was thinking when you were talking about it, right?
Or the NPR, Serial, and he walked out of prison. He never would have if Serial had not focused on his case. It took a long time, and that people cared.
Right.
And so when people say that this country's divided, it is, and it's terrible, and people are angry. But true crime, in a very weird way, brings people together.
Yeah.
It transcends political views. Whether you're, really conservative or you view yourself as really liberal, you care about innocent people in prison. You care about prison issues.
Yeah, right.
Kim Kardashian, along with selling her lipsticks and her, is it Skims?
Yeah, Skims.
Yeah, Skims. It is highlighting people in prison. So that matters to people, and what a great thing.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting too? Because then it also shows you that people care about people.
They do.
So, like, getting back to the thing that we started with was like, can you trust people or whatever? Like, are people good or are people bad? I mean, I think there are a lot of people who have, bad instincts or whatever and make them do certain things. But right, this is another point for people are good.
Except serial killers.
And let me just get off topic, but on topic for a second about Robert Durst, because it was like the opposite, right? He was not wrongly convicted. He was not convicted for way too long.
But he's a perfect example of how the system doesn't work, in the sense that Robert Durst definitely had mental issues. With no question in my mind that he killed his wife so many years ago, but because he came from a very wealthy New York family and had all the money and was willing to spend it on attorneys, and these attorneys were willing to take his money, he really did avoid responsibility for so long. Now, a lot of people don't agree with me. I was sitting in the courtroom in Galveston when he was acquitted of the death of Morris Black, and I agreed with the jury on that. A lot of people didn't. And just to remind you what that story is, terrible. That
was the bags?
Well, what happened was he shot a guy and then dismembered him because he said he was scared, everybody would think he had murdered him.
Right.
And so they never found poor Morris Black's head. And so they couldn't say exactly how Morris Black died, and that's why the jury acquitted him. They had reasonable doubt, even though Durst made no bones, pun intended, about the fact that he had dismembered the body. Why am I talking about this?
Plus, also, this is so bizarre, but also just one last note about Robert Durst was like he moved there and pretended that he was a mute woman or something.
Yeah, Dorothy Steiner.
Which also is kind of brilliant when you think about it, because a mute woman means you don't
so
have
you don't have to hear the voice. But don't you worry about me that I can actually just the name he had, Dorothy Siner, that is a sign I probably need a vacation.
But you know what, though? I feel like, how could you possibly even absorb and retain all of those names, though?
I don't on all of them. And in fact, I think we all, and you must do this too. I really know a case when I'm working on it, and then I get it out of my brain and take the next one. But there's certain stories that you work on. I mean, I worked on the Robert Durst case so many times, and when he was arrested in New Orleans, I was doing that almost every day for the morning show, and so those kind of get imprinted on your brain. I don't remember I remember the victims who mattered to me. I remember the cops who mattered to me. I remember everyone I've ever done a story on who's been wrongfully convicted. I know there's a guy by the name of Crosley Green, who I've worked on a story since he was in death row. He's home now. He could go back to prison, but I'm hoping not. He's innocent. I know the name of his kids. I know everything about Crosley Green. So those stories, those people, those names will always be in my head.
So do you keep in touch ever with the families?
Are you kidding? I mean, I talk to Crosley probably once a month.
So that's
nice. I
nice.
talked to Conrad Roy's mom, and her son was the one who committed suicide. He was encouraged by his...
Oh, is this the TV show, the recent one?
A girl from Plainville, but there was
That
a real
one.
case.
Right.
That's based,
the one that the show is based on is what I mean to say.
I sat through that trial, so I do stay in touch with his mother because she was one of the most damaged mothers, and I do hold that young woman responsible for it, Michelle Carter, because
that was so sad.
Convicted,
yes,
but she could have. All she had to do was tell his sisters or call his mom, and so for poor, I feel it just breaks my heart for Lynn, his mother. It all runs through her head is what if.
Of course,
and
that'll never. Yes, that's to live the rest of your life like that, and to at the same time, that's on top of her not having her son anymore.
Of course,
that's
of course.
double.
And she's a psychiatric nurse, so she had kept her eye on him. Oh, I don't.
So
even
you
get me
okay? So you talk, but
case.
you talk to her like she'll call you or what? How
Yeah,
you check on
we
her?
talk. Yes.
Okay, I love that.
We did we've done a couple hours, but I was there for the entire trial. Because those cases, to me, are so important. Mm-hmm. There were so many issues with that. Come on, it wasn't just a manslaughter case of this young woman who pushed a friend to commit suicide. It is the damage we can do on texts or messages. I thought it was one of the most important stories I've done to show how, you might think you don't have the same responsibility when you're sending someone a message. You're not there in person, but it can have devastating impact.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's also like it's bringing technology
Absolutely.
to the surface, also in a different way, a different form of technology, and how it impacts people.
I was actually upset with the show Girl from Plainville and that was dramatization.
Yes.
Because they made Michelle Carter look more sympathetic. And if you
I
sat
didn't
in
find
the courtroom,
her sympathetic at all.
No, and in the courtroom, in the courtroom, I felt she was as responsible for what happened as anybody else.
Okay. Yeah. That's so sad.
Who commits a crime.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt that was the right decision, and certainly the Massachusetts Supreme Court supported that verdict.
Mm-hmm. So you do keep in touch with a lot of people that you come across, because you must get kind of, and you're telling the story objectively, so you need to look objectively. But I know that as somebody who talks to people regularly, who feels people, like you have to feel some connection sometimes, and really it must affect you.
Well, you don't even have to. You wouldn't be a human being if you didn't feel connection.
Well, I mean, some people are more removed than others, though. I think.
You can't.
You're
do
clearly
this job.
not.
But you can't do this job. You can't get people to talk.
Oh, because you can. That's right.
You can't get people to open up unless you really do feel. You have to. None of us can absolutely know what it's like to have a child murdered. You just can't, or killed, or have a wife murdered or husband murdered. None of us, hopefully we wouldn't, but you can have a sense of the pain and how the friends of the victim sometimes will say, you got to move on. I can't talk about this, but we're willing to still talk about it with them. That's our job, is to let a person
so there is
talk.
a liberation in that for them, a release.
Well, you hope that there is some, if there isn't some cathartic benefit, I don't know why somebody would do it. I hope there is.
Right. And they may not even know that's what they want or what they need, but you're absolutely right that how would they open up to, I don't know if it was something I heard you say or read that you said to somebody about how people open up to you, which is interesting because, of course, this is my thing too. So you said something like, no small talk ever.
Oh, I don't.
So tell me about that.
Well, because you're there for them. You're there for the story, and they are letting you into their lives. So you never talk about yourself unless they ask you. But 9 times out of 10, they really aren't. People aren't. They're going through the worst moment of their life.
Right.
They are not really thinking about your life, and so that's what you're there for. So no, you don't talk about yourself. Then you do get to know a person really well, and you never take your eyes off them during an interview, because you don't want them to be reminded that you're going through some list of questions. Come on, it's a conversation, and you don't want them looking around, because you're not looking at them.
Right.
And the third real reason is because you can read faces. You can tell if you've been doing this as long as I've been doing it, and probably you do the same thing. You can tell when someone's unhappy with your line of questions. Their face changes in sometimes very subtle way, and you got to move away from it. Otherwise, you'll lose them. I still do lose people. I mean, there's because we sometimes have to air the interview. There's a case in California, the Kevin Cooper case, that I've been working on forever. But a sheriff, I was sitting across from him, and I thought I was reading his face, and then out of the blue, he just ripped his mic off and then refused to keep talking to me. I mean, he wouldn't even look at me, and just told the crew, get out, get out, get out. It was great television, but but I said to the producer afterwards, because he goes, Erin, you pushed too much, and I went, I got to tell you, that came out of the blue.
Yeah.
I never saw that coming, and I normally do.
Yeah, because you're tuned in. I could already see it in your facial expression. I could see when I was asking you a question before, as I started asking it, you were very intensely paying attention to what I was asking. So you can tell. I mean, some people, again, are better at picking up on that kind of thing than other people.
I missed that one.
But that
was such a
well, there
lesson
are
to
some
me.
people who won't show anything, I guess. But how did you feel in that moment when you ripped it off? Were you shocked? Did your heart start pounding?
Well, it sounds silly. No, I was thinking, oh man, is this producer going to kill me because we didn't get enough? That was my thought. Oh my God, how do I get it back on? Because sometimes, I mean, most of the time, I can get an interview. Somebody will say, look, I'm not going any further. And I'll go, wait a minute. Let's all right, I'll move away from that. Let's start. And they'll stay. For a guy just to rip his mic off and not even look at me again and throw us out, that was...
Okay, so you will. Okay, first of all, though, your producer probably was happy to have the good television in that way. He
later.
wasn't even
No,
later.
He was really angry with me.
Okay. So then back up to your technique is you'll ask the question, and if they start to feel like no, I don't want to go there, then you'll let it go, but then kind of come back to it, because otherwise you will lose them.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. So that there's a fine balance then between.
And then you hope you reframe it.
Well,
And
are you thinking in your head of how to reframe it?
Yeah, of course. And also, you're hoping that the more time you spend with them, the more they'll trust you.
Yeah.
And because sometimes maybe you hit on something they're not sure they want to talk to you about. So that if you then hit all the things they do want to talk to you, maybe they'll give that to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or I shouldn't tell you this.
Please do.
No, the last resort. So when I'm really scared about asking something because I'm worried I'll lose them, sometimes I won't ask it. But I'll have already told the producer. So we'll be done, and the producer will go, Erin, you need to ask this. And I'll go to the person, oh, I'm sorry. She's making me do it. Not quite that way, but I'll go, "Ooh, are you sure?" And then,
and then they're doing it as a favor to you,
yes,
really, because
they sometimes
really...
will do it. Why am I telling you this? I should never. So the next time I do this, somebody will go, "Okay, I know what you're doing."
I love that trick.
But yeah,
because you have to attack it from different directions,
or sometimes it's, I'm being honest, I don't want to ask that question, and so I'll say, "Okay," at the end, if you bring it up, and then I'm going to put the burden on you, and they can make a choice.
Right.
If I think it's not, look, the producer's not sitting in my seat, but he or she has every right to have a question and have the answer if they believe it should be in the piece.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't agree. So I then, unless I strongly don't agree, then, it's, I get the final say on that. But if I'm not sure, then we do that. And if the person answers, if they don't, I'll go, "Sorry.
Try."
Yeah,
but it's also like you have to kind of feel like you're going to answer the questions that people want to hear the answers to also. Like the worst thing is if you're watching an interview or listening to an interview and the interviewer doesn't go somewhere with the person.
But don't you think that's because they didn't come in prepared enough? Because if you're prepared enough, you're curious.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but even if you're not, like to me, sometimes this is a pet peeve of mine, is that I'll be listening to or watching an interview and the guest will say something. There's a whole mountain of things underneath what they just said, and I want to get to that mountain, and the interviewer will kind of just skim over it and then go somewhere else. That's frustrating to me because I know there's something really interesting there, and you just bypassed it. And that's...
Well, because don't you sometimes, what I thought you were going to say, and this does happen to me, when I go back and look at the interview, I'll go, "Why didn't I not ask that follow-up question?
Yes.
Where was my head?"
Yes.
Because an outsider, a third person, has a better vantage point. And you're so into it and you're thinking, "Okay, is she saying this because of this?" And you might miss. Oh my gosh. It is, though, why I don't follow a list of questions. I write a list of questions a couple of times before I do sit down. I have it in my lap, but I never follow it because I'll miss something.
Yeah, so that's the same thing we were saying before. Like, you really don't know what you're going to find if you go in premeditated too much. I do the same thing. I'll do a little bit of research and I'll jot down some bullet points. Like, oh, it would be interesting to talk about this, or let's see if we can review that. And then I'll look at it beforehand. Sometimes I'll tuck it in the chair next to me. Other times I just, like right now, I don't have my questions with me at all, or my bullet points with me at all.
Oh, so you're funny because I have it. Even if I never look at it, I feel like psychologically it's here.
You do.
If I need it. So I'm impressed that you will just go. I would never not have it on my lap. I don't know why. It must be some kind of psychological thing.
That's interesting. Sometimes I feel a little self-conscious if I have questions here, because I always want the person I'm talking to know that I'm really there with them and I'm not thinking about that.
They're going to know that if you're not looking at it. They're going to know it. And, to me, they know if you're interviewing someone that you've done some research and there are things you want to ask.
So before I did this, I was a therapist. So
that's
part of it,
that is.
Part of it for me was also, like, some therapists will have a pad or something in their lap and they'll take notes. I always felt like that would be distracting for the person who is in therapy. So I would never have anything like that. Like, I wouldn't have a desk between the two of us. Nothing like that, because I felt like those were barriers to trust and I wanted them to feel okay. And you were making me think of this before when you were talking about the different questions that maybe they don't want to answer, right? So they need to trust you and genuinely trust you, and they can trust me. It wasn't like I was out to get them, but you want to make them feel comfortable enough to talk about the things that really they'll feel better about once they talk about them. So I started as a therapist, no notes, nothing like that. So then when I went and started doing this, I also felt a little funny, I think, about maybe but I guess I hear what you're saying, but it's my...
Right, I worry. I have to say, sometimes somebody will say something I don't want to forget, and I'll write it down, but I worry about that they'll say, "What did she write down?"
Oh, yeah, they'll be self-conscious about what they just said.
But, and so sometimes I'll even say, "I don't want to forget that." So they'll know.
That's better.
Yes, that I'm just writing down what they just said so I don't forget what they just told me.
But I think even with all these great techniques that we're talking about, fundamentally, it comes down to intuitively what people sense from you.
Well, yeah, because you're really, when it comes down to it, it's two human beings. When when I'm doing an interview, it usually centers around something tragic and painful. So that changes the tone, but it's two people. And I think, even though I think we need younger faces on TV, and we do, we need to train people. But over time, it's the people who've been doing this for a while who are probably going to be able to bring the most out or have the most human experiences, raising kids, worrying about paying bills, all of those kinds of things. And you can't, when you're right out of college, you may look a lot better than the older reporter, but there's something to be said for reporters who's led a life just like the person he or she is interviewing.
I fully agree. I've always been more interested in older people, like always, because there's so many more dimensions going on there.
Or
so
people have had hardships, same thing.
Same thing.
And survived. I can always learn from people like that.
But don't you think even people who haven't had objective hardships, still life can have been difficult for them as well? So I feel like, it's all relative, yes, but even if you didn't have a major tragedy, you've still been through the ringer, I feel like most people have.
Oh, no question.
Because you know what you know, not compared to other people necessarily. So I don't know. But yes, I think that everybody has interesting things to talk about and share based on all the things they've experienced. One of my favorite things is interviewing like the old timers from Hollywood. Love that.
Oh, I bet.
Oh my God.
I bet that would be fun, yes.
Was Ed Asner? Come on. Marion Ross? I can tell you, Shire, she's not really an old timer, but Tippi Hedren, like the things they've been through and the perspective they have, fascinating. So the podcast, is it the same? Does it cover the same things that you cover on 48 Hours, or is it a little bit different?
It's a little different. I will cover some of the same cases. The case the episode that was just released this week, and then part 2 is next week, was a 48 Hours case. But I did the whole interview that no one's ever seen, the whole interview I did with the killer. And it's just so interesting to hear him because he's so self-confident until he didn't realize how much we knew about his backstory and so much we couldn't put in the 48 Hours. So when I do a case that appeared on 48 Hours, it's a lot of what we couldn't show.
Okay.
Or I advance the story. So there are 2 examples of that where a woman, young mother, shot her ex-husband claiming self-defense. And we went back and talked to her to see if her story had changed at all. But we got a very interesting new perspective that we had never thought of, and certainly not on the 48 Hours. And a case we did in Phoenix where a young woman disappeared and there was a trial, her boyfriend, and that was a fascinating story because the guy, you can't make this story up. He pretended he was a University of Michigan graduate because he could pick up women. That was people liked Michigan grads.
Yeah.
And killed her. So, but who would fake a Michigan diploma to pick up women? And then after he killed the woman, he used her credit card to go on dating services. I was so outraged by that. But anyway, why I was telling, so that was a story we did in 48, but they never found her. Well, in our podcast, you will know what happened to her.
That just reminded me of the Sarah Lawrence, the Sarah Lawrence. This just happened. There was a father of a Sarah Lawrence student.
Yes, who was like a Svengali. Yes.
That should be a story too, maybe.
Another story is that one, the young woman at, is it Princeton?
Oh, the one
disappeared.
who was
Yale?
In Princeton, who was just found.
Yes. There's more to that story. There is more to that story.
So how do you not take every story?
I know, because you want that one. I would, because there's only so much time, and
but isn't it hard to be like, I want to check that out too?
We all talk about it, because it's a busman's holiday. Even if you're not doing that story, you're talking with your friends. Like, I know there's more to that. That is going to come out more, and I just want more.
Yeah. So
let's I have a screen at 12.
Let's do 5 minutes. Can we do 5 more minutes? And we'll take a few pictures, and then that'll be that.
No problem. I just they'll kill me if I don't go to the screening.
Of course. What is the screening for?
The show that airs.
So tell me how that works. So you go to a screening room and they have it all set.
Well, yeah, because it's almost done, and the lawyers will be there. and we'll see if we have to change any lines.
Okay, so you go to screen it like about a week before.
We hope it's done. We've been I mean, I've screened it so many times, but not. This is the
big one.
Latest version.
Oh, okay.
The very latest, close to time. The lawyers have seen the scripts, but they haven't seen it on tape, and it's to watch it as a viewer. Yeah, so it's a week before. It's Friday. It airs a week from now, and so we all sit in a room and and watch it in the dark on a huge screen.
And how do you feel normally during it?
Well, because I've seen it so many times.
Okay.
But it's really good because I'll do promotion next week, and you want to know the case in and out. And when you're working on a lot of different stories, I mean, we shot that earlier in the summer. So you want to know it so well and be back in it so that you can really talk about it.
Right. And so you've seen it so many times. Do you get sick of seeing it?
No.
Really?
It's a really fascinating case. And I'll probably do a podcast on it only because there's a huge question in the middle of it that no one can answer. The cops can't answer. The family can't answer. And I think I'll do a podcast with my producer because it's all we've been talking about. And today I'm going to make a phone call where I hope I get a little more insight. It won't go in our hour.
Okay.
But if I get more insight, the producer and I will put on parts of the case and then talk about the big question that we were never able to answer in the 48 hours.
Yeah, that's cool to be able to have that.
I know.
As
that's
an
why
extra.
That's why I love doing the podcast.
And the podcast is called My Life of Crime.
My life, because I do. I have a life of crime.
And you can get on any podcast app,
Yep,
obviously. Spotify,
Amazon,
Apple Podcasts.
Apple,
all the
you
things.
Name it,
And even some
Spotify.
people listen to podcasts on YouTube. This is a fact. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, they will put it on YouTube and just listen to, they won't watch anything. It'll be a static image.
Right.
I don't know why, but I always let my podcast go up on YouTube because there are plenty of people I know who like to listen.
That's interesting. I never even thought about that. I love podcasts. So, I mean, when you're a busy person, you're always, kind of multitasking. And so you can get work done listening to a podcast.
Yeah. I always like to say that the best time for a podcast is when you're doing something else, just like you said.
Exactly.
So walking the dog, cleaning the house, on a train, in a car, on a plane. I don't love it on a plane for some reason, but when you're doing something else, it's perfect.
I agree.
And it makes time fly, in the car especially. So let me ask you a few kind of bigger, broader questions, and then we'll wrap up. So what was one of the best times in your life?
That's an interesting question. I would always say the best times in my life are really family. I have a great, great son. And I have loves, we're very close and we have a wonderful time. And I have a twin sister. So I would have to say the
you have a
best.
twin sister.
Yeah, our trips that I take with my sister. So those are the best times in my life. But work is not work to me. Work is my life. So it's hard not to combine that. I mean, I went to the war in Iraq. It was one of the most interesting, scary, challenging times of my life. I would put that as a time that, on your deathbed you will remember. But best times I would have to say are with family. Yeah, because I just adore my son. I think every mother does, and he makes me laugh, and so taking trips or doing something like that is terrific.
Okay, what was one of the hardest lessons that you learned in the entertainment industry?
Well, I think you're always learning something. So doing a terrible interview, but the moment that was hardest for me was in the first Gulf War, and it happened right when we were doing a show. We were doing a 48 hours, and all of a sudden, Gulf War started. And so I had to do a live shot, and I didn't do a good job. And the Wall Street Journal wrote about it. And so you already knew you didn't do a good job, but then to have the rest of the world know that you didn't do a good job. So
that's not fair.
No. And it's still, and then here's the worst part of that. So there was the columnist had written about it. She was a television columnist by the name of Dorothy Rabinowitz. Notice how I will never forget her name. You don't know who she
Another
is.
name.
I will remember Dorothy Rabinowitz. And later I ran into
one
her,
night.
and we were talking, and I said, "Oh, I still hurt from it." She goes, "What did I write?" So, so that was a good lesson to remember that what's huge to you is not huge to anybody else, including the woman who wrote it. So probably no one else in the world remembers it. So that may have been one of the best, most painful, but best lessons, is that you will make a lot of mistakes in your life. And when you're in television, you will make it in front of millions of people.
Oh, that is hard.
And it will bother you, but it probably won't ruin your life, and you get yourself back up and you keep moving. So I think that is, probably in my professional, that was probably one of the worst.
Right. Do you have a personal one?
Well, I lost a nephew who was killed on a motorcycle accident. So that has affected me because I can't see anyone on a motorcycle. It wasn't his fault. It was a rainy day, and a car turned in front of him and killed him. So, so you don't. And my sister's never been the same. I think those thoughts every time I interview somebody who's lost, the more time you've lived, the better reporter you are, because you feel more. Sometimes people ask me, "Oh, you've been doing crime. You probably, you're jaded, probably doesn't." And I'll say, no, over time, I think it hurts more. I feel more empathy because I have experienced more. And even though I don't know exactly what that person's going through, I know it's hard.
Mm-hmm. And that's a gift to them, that they feel that empathy from you.
They're
not alone.
Yeah, and you have to. If you don't feel that, you shouldn't be doing this job.
Okay, my last question is, what's a common misconception about you? I guess maybe that is you just answered it. Then we'll go to part 2, unless you have a different one.
What do you mean by
what's the image that people have of you that maybe isn't spot on, and who are you really?
Oh, well, around here, everybody thinks I think everyone in prison is innocent. And that is not true. That is not true. I used to, some people would kid me and say, the ERIN Innocence Project. But that is not true. I interview far more guilty people than innocent people. I don't think that. And a lot of people think that I really care about work too much, and that's true.
Okay.
That's true.
I love it. And I think we're all better off because you do care about work so much. It shows.
It does matter to me. I'm passionate about it.
All right. Thank you so much for doing this.
This was fun. This was like we should have had coffee. This was like a little coffee.
So that was Erin Moriarty. Do you feel like you know her very well? I do, and I really like her. So I hope that you feel the same way. And if you liked this talk, you will probably love my chat with Meredith Vieira, another broadcast journalist. You can catch that right now. Just click on the link in today's show description, and it'll bring you right to my talk with Meredith Vieira. Thanks for watching. I'm Kara, and I'll see you next time.